I've never seen anything like that in my life.
Are you watching? Are you watching? Are you watching?
I knew by page 5 that, which is very early, that there was a very good chance that I was going to want to be involved in this, and then by page 10 I definitely knew, okay, I don't want to miss this. And then it just was like, okay, well, how does the last 10 pages end? And everything was perfect. He's the best. I mean, he is such a visionary. He thinks outside the box. He's so original. He's so direct and knows what he wants, but he still allows other people to just play in a way. And when it's great, he doesn't touch anything and he lets you kind of do your own thing. But then when you need help, he comes in and he's like, nope, this is what it is. But it's the best. It's the best. The thing that I always found interesting with her is that her intention was very pure, but the execution was sometimes a little like up in the air. And her heart, she has a very big heart, and I personally love characters and scenes and just films that her character starts out one way and ends completely differently. And yeah, there's something that I love about a little bit of a messy teacher that I was like, okay, I love it. He's just so lovely and so easy to work with, and I've been the biggest fan of Alden's for so long, and then I was very nervous to meet him because I was a fan of his, and then once I met him I was like, oh, he's also like the coolest person. But it was kind of one of those things. I think the scene in the bar, that scene was written so beautiful, and we were very nervous because we wanted to make sure that like all the movie gods kind of were there that day and everything was, smooth sailing. And I'm very happy how that scene turned out, and we had so much fun acting it, and I had so much fun acting with Alden. I think she grows up. I think in the beginning, she kind of feels like an adult child. And I think that's why she has an easy time relating to the kids. And then by the end of it, she has to grow up. There's like a switch, in a way. How wild it is. And how they didn't know where it was going. And I think they're just going to be talking about it because there's never been anything like it.
There was something that I didn't know yet that I found out later, which made sense. That was the first thing that I'll tell you in a second. And then the second is the structure. I love that I didn't want to be an actor. My dad was an actor, and I had no interest in following in his footsteps, kind of insecurity of not knowing when you're going to work and all that stuff. And I saw a play called Tamara, and it takes place in a big house, and you follow a character, and you follow that character all over the house. I think they call it Punch Drunk Theater now. And then you can follow a different character at intermission and all that. And I like that kind of non-linear, chaotic thing. And it reminded me of that. It reminded me of early Inarritu. It reminded me of early Nolan. And I just liked that kind of thing. And then I was intrigued to meet him. And then ultimately, he told me what every character was based off of. And that was a grief that he had been going through where he lost somebody in his life. And he was a very open, available human being, and I was very intrigued by that too. He's a lot of people that I have known in my life, It's a lot of like super masculine, kind of cut off, living a concept instead of a life type of deal. And I love that he gets broken. I like anybody. I mean, it's more dramatic anyway if you're going to play a character and it's just linear and the same throughout the whole thing. I guess if the story's really great. So that to me was an interesting enough character to want to delve into, because I love being able to be reminded in any way that that's not to be, you know, to not act in that way and cut yourself off from your children and not be grateful for what's around you. He partners. The fact that, you know, I think he's taken everything on himself, and I think he's exhausted all possibilities. He's a total control freak, and he's not winning. He's not making any headway whatsoever. And I think that the fact that he blames her, so he brings his enemy close, thinking that she may have answers. I think he's just utilizing every bit of control that he can muster in order to win in the end. And I think what ends up happening is he kind of breaks, and he realizes that he actually misses his kid, and that he's sorry that he didn't reveal during that relationship, you know, how much he loved him and all that. It's one of those movies that turned out way better than I thought, and I knew it was going to be good. But when you see something that just has, with sound design, with camera movement, with character work, with storyline, with the bleeding over, you know, the intersecting storylines between each character, all that kind of stuff. It's like there's every reason for it not to work. And then you have somebody like Zach that comes along. He's just an elevated filmmaker. And I don't know that at the time. And then you see the movie and you go, wow. So thank God this guy exists, and I can't wait to see what he does next.
It takes bigger risks. It has bigger set pieces. It's got, you know, way more characters to kind of track throughout, and it has a bigger mystery at the heart of it. So I don't know, it just feels like an escalation in almost every way. I like to just kind of just start writing and just let the story come to me. I don't think through the story, and you know, I first started writing Julia's character, you know, that character, and I kind of came to a natural end of her little story, and then I knew, like, I can't tell her story without telling Josh's character story. So I just moved on to him, and then I was like, this is what the movie wants to be. It wants to be these vignettes. Everyone has to put the whole movie on their shoulders, right? And so, look, I knew Julia could do this. Like, she's just such a diamond. I knew she had it in her. Josh is a movie star. I don't need to explain why I got Josh. Alden, I have been such a fan of Alden from Hail Caesar. I just thought he was, like, what he did in that movie was so amazing to me, and I just couldn't believe it didn't rocket him into being, like, top of the mountain forever. So I was just so hungry to get him. And then Austin Abrams also, like, he's this actor that I saw in this movie Brad Status that Mike White made. It was like a two-hander with him and Ben Stiller, and he was so young, he was like a teenager, and he was so confident and understated, and he just, like, stole the movie. And for a teenager to be able to just like lazily steal a movie from Ben, I was like, oh my God, this guy's a miracle. So I knew I wanted him. What scares me is in the movie. That's I try and put what scares me in. But, you know, I think for me it's like, there's the Shining. You got the twins in the hallway, and why is that so scary? You know, it's not a jump scare. It's just awful. And so I'm trying to always, where can I find something awful that isn't, like, startling, but is just arresting? You know, like, you could look at the image with the sound off, you could freeze frame it, and the more you look at it, the worse it would get. So it's hard to do that. I think I'm trying to do that in a couple of moments in this movie, like in the woods, where James is in the woods and he sees what he sees, you know, or, you know, the image of the impossible thing floating above the house, which maybe is not so scary, but it's unnerving. So I'm drawn to horror that is horrible in the quiet moments, as opposed to, like, the big loud pops. My generation, so the late 90s to the early aughts was where I just kind of the die was cast for me, you know. So that to me is like Paul Thomas Anderson, Coen Brothers, David Fincher, you know, that kind of generation really made a huge mark on me. Larkin and Tom and I talked a lot about Gregory Crutzen, the photographer, and we, you know, and we talked about Mayor of Easttown, you know, this very real, authentic, lived-in town that did not feel glamorous at all and felt warts and all, and there's there's clutter and there's extension cords, where they shouldn't be, and that kind of a thing. So that felt great. I just wanted it to feel like everything was on location, even though we did some stage work. I wanted it to just feel like lived in.
When I was like 10, 15 pages into it, I was like, this is one of the most interesting things I've ever read. And it really was one of the best scripts I've ever read. And I think the only way I can understand that is that when I then met with Zach and talked to him, he brought me into how personal and from what a deep place this all came from. And when any artist is like working from that kind of place, there's just an aliveness and a resonance to it that's very, you just feel, even though you can't put your finger on it. I think one of the things that I came to understand about the film is that every character in this film is really like a different part of Zach. And so once I knew that and we talked a little bit, I could sort of look at Paul's story and understand pretty easily what part of him that was coming from. And it also made it feel more meaningful to play this part because it felt like I was playing some part of a person that I knew and cared about. So, and then all the, things you do and trying to understand it and spending some time with police officers and stuff like that. Well, it's kind of a combination of like it's a meeting of what's in the narrative and the fiction with what's in the actual room in terms of chemistry when you meet the person. And we got along very, very well, very quickly. And the thing about Zach's writing that I really loved is how much is suggested that you don't actually see on screen. There's so much detail and subtext and history in each of these scenes, especially the kind of long scene that her and I have. And so you get to fill in this whole world of what that history was. And that was all really rich work. I think he meets James at a moment where he's vulnerable in the sense that he's lost control of his own story, his own life. I think we all when we're doing things that we didn't totally say yes to internally, or we're living lives that aren't exactly what we want, there's a feeling of like you're a victim of life or the world or fate or something. And I think that's a bit where he's at. And when he meets James, there's a way in which this is the worst possible thing he could have come across in this particular moment, and it drives him over the edge. Understanding the world you're in and the environment is as important as the environment I grew up in is to who I am, right? Like, it shapes us. And so Zach also created like this wonderful, specific, but sort of everyman sort of town that really had a feeling to it. So understanding kind of where this might be or how this town might function. I grew up there, so there's that just really feeds you, especially because it's a thing happening within this community. Somebody I talked to recently said likened it to like Stephen King books, which often take place like in a very particular place, in a town. Well, there seems to be now almost like a whole subculture of people debating the meanings of different things, and I think there'll certainly be a lot of that with this film. But I think there's just going to be a lot of you gotta see this, because it's I think it's very heartening and makes me very hopeful to see the way that people respond to things that are original and authentic. And that's more now than I think it was in the past, and I really appreciate that. And I think that audiences are gonna be very proud to be just a small part of that big vision that Zach brought. He's so fun. I love at this era of my career getting to work with people who are my own age, it's just really fun, and you have similar shared reference points, shared cultural experiences. He is really sweet, which you wouldn't know based on the movies. He is very funny. He's very collaborative, very earnest, and very, he's got a lot of life in him. He's just a very alive person, and he really loves the material we're working on as much as we do. It really felt deeply personal to him, and he wanted to and when you're acting for him, you can feel that, and it kind of lifts, it elevates everything you're doing.